Tonight, the East Coast struggles to recover from Hurricane Sandy. Up and down the coast, homes have been destroyed by wind, by water, by fire.
We're just shocked that it's happened to us.
Millions are without power. Roadways and tunnels are flooded.
It is beyond anything I thought I'd ever see.
Dozens of people have died. The damage is in the tens of billions of dollars. The cleanup and recovery could take months. On day one, we'll have extensive coverage from our entire CBS News team.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley reporting tonight from Lower Manhattan.
This is a special expanded edition. Good evening. We're on the southern tip of Manhattan, the area known as the Battery, named for the battery of cannons erected here in the 17th century to defend a young city. But nothing could defend New York City from the wall of water that came crashing ashore in one of the biggest storms so far of the 21st century. Hurricane Sandy filled the tunnels here with floodwaters unlike anything this city has seen in decades. The storm brought misery to 14 states from North Carolina to Maine. At least 35 people in 9 states have been killed. And more than 7 million homes and businesses up and down the coast are without electricity tonight. Officials say it could be days, if not weeks, before all the power is restored. Close to 1 million people have been evacuated. More than 18,000 are living in shelters. Downtown New York City, the financial capital of the world, was largely shut down for a second day, with the power out and the streets flooded. Governor Andrew Cuomo called the scene frightening.
While the Hudson River was coming over from the west, the East River was coming over from the east.
Subways became waterways. A boat wound up on railroad tracks, and the governor of New Jersey couldn't believe his eyes.
There are houses in the middle of Route 35.
First estimates of the damage are in the $20 billion range. One of the worst areas of wholesale destruction is the Breezy Point neighborhood of Queens on Long Island. A fire broke out here. Flames blasted by hurricane-force winds burned 80 to 100 homes to ashes. It is not known whether anyone was killed in the conflagration. President Obama, who will see the damage in New Jersey firsthand tomorrow, had a message today for those who lost so much.
We are standing behind you, and we are going to do everything we can to help you get back on your feet.
We have a team of CBS News correspondents covering the aftermath of the hurricane. First, we'll go to Elaine Quijano in New Jersey, the state where the storm made landfall last night.
Scott, here in the town of Moonachie, the problem was tidal surge. One resident said it was as if someone had turned on a giant faucet. There was no time to think and barely any time to escape. The rescue started at daybreak in the town of Moonachie. Boat after boat filled with people who spent a terrifying night stranded in their homes with waters rising. Christina Barasevic was in her basement apartment shortly after midnight.
I have a sliding door and I'm like, oh my gosh. And so my fridge toppled over, my bed was floating, I got a brand new sofa that's floating.
Moonachie's only firehouse was destroyed. Teams from surrounding towns joined New Jersey National Guard troops in the effort to save hundreds of people. Staff Sergeant Katie Cataldo says it was tricky and dangerous work.
We can only get so close to the homes, and then if we have to get out of the vehicle and assist in getting them up, then we will.
Moonachie and neighboring Little Ferry were swamped by a tidal surge of the Hackensack River, which sent water rushing over a berm. Both towns were washed over by more than 5 feet of water. Sonata Tomasetti was in Little Ferry with her young daughter to help her aging parents.
Within a matter of minutes, I think, where the basement got completely flooded. There's an apartment down there that's completely destroyed, and basically we're just waiting for this rescue.
Thousands of people from both communities had to be bused to temporary shelters, among them Christina Barasevic. Hurricane Sandy claimed her home, her belongings, and her car, but gave her perspective.
I'm safe, my dog is safe, my neighbors are safe. Houses and cars we can replace. It's really not what's important at all.
Long Beach Island, a barrier beach on the New Jersey shore, was evacuated ahead of Sandy. One police official there said today it could be days or weeks before residents are allowed back. Chip Reed is about to show you why. He's in Summers Point.
From the air, Long Beach Island, New Jersey appears to be crisscrossed by canals, but in fact, the storm surge brought ashore by Sandy filled the streets with water. Many homes on the barrier island are partially submerged, some knocked off their foundations. Whole fleets of boats have been swept from their moorings and deposited on what was once dry ground or left in crumpled heaps. Search and rescue crews spent the daylight hours looking for Jersey Shore residents who may have been stranded by the fierce storm. On another barrier island, some houses in the town of Seaside Heights are half buried in sand. One couple whose home was inundated with water clung to a tree until they were rescued by police. Nearby, a pier with an amusement park was destroyed when it was swamped by enormous waves. State officials say several of the state's barrier island beaches have disappeared. The task of cleaning up here, they say, is a mammoth job that is just beginning. Barrier islands run along more than 3/4 of New Jersey's Atlantic coast, and Scott, officials here say they played an enormously important role in protecting the mainland from Hurricane Sandy's first punch.
Let me show you where we are right now. We are less than a mile from the New York Stock Exchange, but have a look at this. This is normally a busy roadway, and that is a tunnel down there. The sign says 12 feet, 8 inches of clearance, but it looks like about 10 feet of that is underwater tonight. New York was a tale of two cities as the storm came in. Here's what Manhattan usually looks like with its lights shining brightly, but last night, Lower Manhattan, south of 39th Street, where we are now, was plunged into darkness after flooding caused an explosion at a Con Edison electrical substation. 250,000 homes and businesses lost power. Jim Axelrod reports the trouble was just beginning.
Workers are now taking down the boards that were supposed to keep water out of subway stations and loading sandbags back onto the truck, having done their best in a battle they could have never won.
There was no way to prepare that would have kept the water out?
No, there's no way. How you gonna stop water? Water goes where it wants to go.
7 tunnels linking Manhattan to Brooklyn and Queens are flooded. The signals, switches, even the third rails are covered with sludge.
It's the worst.
MTA workman John O'Neill went down for a look in the South Ferry station and reported back.
The ferry's like almost too full to the top.
You want to over there already?
Yeah, we want to check it out. It's full to the top. Forget about it.
Even after the water's gone away, 6,200 subway cars must be inspected, along with 600 miles of track and 468 subway stations.
The MTA last night faced a disaster as devastating as it has ever faced in its history.
Joe Loda is chairman of the Metropolitan Transit Authority.
Sandy wreaked havoc on the entire transportation system, the subways, the buses, Metro North, and the Long Island Railroad, in every single borough of the city and in every single county of the MTA region.
Utility workers are pumping water round the clock, water that engulfed cars and flooded underground power equipment. Nearly 250,000 customers are out of power in Manhattan alone. No power means no traffic lights in Lower Manhattan, and no lights means chaos at intersections. And no mass transit makes these the most sought-after vehicle in New York.
You're the most popular guy in the city today, huh?
Yes, sir.
City buses will resume partial service tonight, full service tomorrow, and to help get the city moving again, Scott, those buses will operate free of charge both tonight and tomorrow.
People in the New York area lucky enough to have power turned on their televisions this morning and saw something amazing. A few miles to the east of us on the Rockaway Peninsula in Queens, an entire neighborhood was up in flames. Michelle Miller is in Breezy Point.
This is Breezy Point shortly after the inferno started at 11 p.m. last night. Blocks of homes engulfed in flames. Firefighters hauled hoses through flooded streets. Nearly 200 firefighters were called into battle as the wind-whipped flames jumped from house to house. Breezy Point is a close-knit neighborhood of mostly firefighters and cops. Danny McKeefrey is a volunteer fireman who rushed here to help his brother save his home.
Everything was on fire. I mean, flames were 50 feet up in the air, and just taking everything out. There was no stopping it.
There was nothing you could do.
There was no whatever. There's no water pressure. There's no. You're trying to draft out of the ocean, but then you're sucking up everything that you see on the ground. So it's clogging the hoses. There wasn't anything you could really do.
By daybreak, more than 80 homes were still smoldering. In this yard, only a religious icon left standing in the debris. A couple of miles away, another block of homes was left in ashes. Catherine Sullivan lived in the Rockaways her entire life, but was unprepared for what she saw today.
So many people have lost their homes now. Fire, it's breezy, it's just burning, and it's just very upsetting for all of us. So if anybody's out there to be thinking of us, say your prayers for us, and that's what you can do.
Many in this community lost family members in 9/11. More died next door in Belle Harbor a few months later when American Flight 587 crashed. But even with this latest tragedy, many told us they are not leaving. They will rebuild.
Whole family lost everything. But no, I'll figure it out.
Will you rebuild here?
Well, we have to. There's nowhere else to go.
This is the only road leading in or out of Breezy Point, and many residents, after surveying the damage, are going someplace now. We walked with a lot of them, and as they passed a neighbor, they'd ask, "How are you? And what can I do for you?" That is, they lost everything. You hear that term, strong sense of community, in a lot of places, Scott, but here you get the sense they really mean it.
Sandy lost its hurricane status yesterday, but it is still packing strong winds. The center is about 50 miles east of Pittsburgh. Maximum sustained winds now about 45 miles an hour. As the storm moves west-northwest, storm warnings are up for parts of the Great Lakes. Will Sandy mean higher gas prices? The Coast Guard searches for a captain who went down with his ship in the storm. And an entire town in the dark tonight when the CBS Evening News continues. Throughout the Northeast, an army of utility workers is out tonight beginning work to restore power. They face a long battle, block by block, town by town. In Connecticut, more than 500,000 homes and businesses lost power. Seth Doan is in Stonington, Connecticut tonight.
Utility crews prepared to restore electricity today, while residents on Diving Street prepared for something else.
How long do you think you'll be without power? At least a week. They're saying at least a week, maybe 10 days.
The hurricane blasted David Stevenson's neighborhood and pushed its pier into a pile. Firefighters pumped out flooded basements here. But the problem that worried Amy Nicholas most was no electricity.
Why is this area hit so hard?
By the trees. The trees went down. There's so many trees down in the park where all the power lines are.
About 94% of Stonington, Connecticut is without power. Diving Street neighbor David Forrest remembers how long it took to get electricity restored after Hurricane Irene.
How is it to know you're going into a period of a week or so without power?
Yeah, I think it's better than last year. We kept thinking it was going to be every day. We get power back.
Just next door, Susan Crow says she's prepared for a number of rough days.
You can have a shower, but it's a cold shower. You have no hot water. Of course, you have nothing to cook with.
Down the street, we bumped into utility contractor Rusty Maxwell, who said he was too busy to stop for long.
What's involved with getting the power back on here?
Well, the power company has to go evaluate all the feeders and the power sources and go from there.
Scott, this is what those utility crews are up against, giant trees on top of power lines. These trees have to be removed before power can be restored.
We wondered if Sandy would disrupt gasoline supplies. It turns out 6 refineries in the Northeast were affected by the storm. 2 of them shut down and 4 scaled back production. All of them are expected back in full operation within a week. We spoke to one analyst who told us that gasoline may be in short supply for just a few days in the Northeast, but there should be no increase in prices. In a moment, we'll talk with the man who is managing the disaster in New York City, Police Commissioner Ray Kelly. Back now from Lower Manhattan, one of the men in charge of managing the emergency response to Hurricane Sandy here in New York City is the Police Commissioner Ray Kelly. Earlier today, we went to police headquarters to speak with him. Commissioner Kelly is running the police department response from a command center that pulls together the military and all government agencies. They built it after 9/11 for days like this. Kelly told us the hurricane has brought the worst destruction to the city since the terrorist attack. His concerns now are public safety, with nearly 1 million people in a blackout, and continuing to search for survivors. How many people in New York City are without power?
About 750,000 people, about 750,000 people without power.
And what is the law enforcement and public safety concern with that?
Well, we're still in a rescue mode. Certainly in Staten Island, we know that people are still stranded, trapped in some location. So we're engaged in that along with the fire department. And then we have a public safety security mission that we have to carry through. A lot of dark areas in the city. We know that we have to have a significant police presence in those locations.
You had to fly around the city in your helicopter today. What did you see?
Lots of devastation, lots of damage, and it means a tremendous amount of recovery work. But as I say, we're still very much in a rescue mode.
When you saw the site of the Breezy Point fire, you thought what?
Well, it looked like something I've never seen in New York City because of the number of houses and the fact that they were all totally leveled. 80-something houses are just totally gone.
You know, there's obviously no comparison in terms of loss of life, but I wonder if there are aspects of this that are even more difficult than 9/11.
Well, it's hard to compare. 9/11 was such a horrific event. What we have here, of course, is devastation spread out over a greater area. But it's the worst thing that happened to this city, certainly since 9/11. Police Commissioner Ray Kelly.
The city is slowly working its way back to normal. Partial bus service was restored this evening, and the stock market will reopen tomorrow for the first trading session of the week. The Coast Guard is not giving up hope of finding the captain of the HMS Bounty, the sailing ship built for the movie Mutiny on the Bounty. It went down in the hurricane yesterday off North Carolina. Captain Robin Walbridge was wearing a survival suit, and rescuers say that there is a chance that he is alive. 14 others were rescued. One of the crew members was killed. She was Claudine Christian, a descendant of Fletcher Christian, who led the famed Mutiny on the Bounty in 1789. When a Manhattan hospital lost power last night, our Dr. John LaPook responded with many other physicians to the emergency. You'll hear his story next. Our medical correspondent, Dr. John LaPook, raced to the scene of a storm emergency last night. A hospital here in downtown Manhattan had to be evacuated after the backup generators failed. John has new details tonight about the blackout that left hundreds of patients at risk.
So this is the basement? The dark halls of NYU Langone Medical Center now lead to a lecture hall submerged under 12 feet of water.
Well, it looks like a swimming pool.
Dr. Robert Grossman is the CEO of the hospital.
We had a failure of our primary power, our secondary power, our backup. All the backup systems failed within 30 minutes. So we went from functioning perfectly to being completely out of power.
It quickly became a race against time to evacuate 300 patients, including 20 newborns, from the neonatal intensive care unit. When I arrived shortly before midnight with Dr. Mark Pachapin, ambulances were lined up waiting to transport patients to nearby hospitals.
Complete blackout here.
Dr. Pachapin demonstrated how hospital personnel used plastic sleds to evacuate patients down dark, narrow staircases.
There were two things that had to be taken care of. One was making sure that everybody actually got off of the floor, they weren't left there. The other was figuring out who was the sickest, who needed to go down first.
31-year-old Christine Chin was in the intensive care unit with complications following a liver transplant. She was taken down 14 floors on a sled.
Every turn and corner, the great thing about it is that they would keep asking me, "Are you okay? Are you okay?"
Chin was transferred to Mount Sinai Medical Center and is resting comfortably.
Is this the worst case scenario for somebody who runs a hospital?
It's hard to imagine a worst case, but the worst case would have been if we lost one patient. That would have been the worst case.
Everybody got out safely, thanks to an extraordinary team effort on a day when everything else went wrong. Dr. John LaPook, CBS News, New York.
Good evening again, and for those of you just joining us, this is a special expanded edition of the CBS Evening News. We're in Lower Manhattan in New York City, one of the areas hardest hit by Hurricane Sandy. The storm is now blamed for at least 38 deaths in 9 states along the East Coast. More than 7 million homes and businesses are without electricity tonight. For comparison, our research department tells us that's about half as many as the Great Blackout of 1965. Sandy made landfall last night near Atlantic City, New Jersey, and Jeff Glor is there tonight. Jeff?
Scott, the president has declared 8 counties in New Jersey as major disaster zones, and this is one of them. Atlantic City was battered with more than 14 inches of rain by Sandy and winds exceeding 70 miles an hour. An unforgettable experience for those who chose to stay behind.
The wind was just circulating as the building that was right across from my bathroom, I seen it start ripping off.
We went up with a Coast Guard helicopter. They've been conducting missions from North Carolina to Cape Cod, despite the still strong winds.
What kind of wind speed are you guys looking at up here right now? About 25 knots.
More than 80% of Atlantic City was once flooded. Some of that water remains.
They're up here doing a damage assessment, but also looking for any potentially leaking fuel or ships that may be adrift.
Piers are mangled. Sections of the city's landmark boardwalk smashed. More than 80,000 in the county are without power. And today, Atlantic City Mayor Lorenzo Langford shot back at allegations by New Jersey Governor Chris Christie that Lorenzo didn't do enough to evacuate people.
For the governor to inject politics into a situation such as this is reprehensible.
Scott, a boil water advisory remains in effect in Atlantic City tonight. The county was able to get 40,000 gallons of bottled water, and the city is handing those out tonight.
Jeff, thanks very much. We're joined now by Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey. Governor, the president is going to be with you tomorrow. I wonder what you're going to show him.
I think we're going to show him the Jersey Shore, Scott. That's the most devastated part of our state right now. I toured it today myself by helicopter and on the ground, and it is unthinkable what's happened at Seaside Heights, the place where they filmed the TV show The Jersey Shore. Literally, the boardwalk at Seaside Heights is washed into the ocean. I saw a roller coaster and a log flume sitting in the ocean today. What's happened to the Jersey Shore is just incalculable, and it's going to take a long, long time to rebuild.
Governor, what can you tell us about search and rescue in your state tonight?
Well, search and rescue is still going on, Scott, and has been very successful. We've only so far, thank God, lost 3 lives here in New Jersey, and search and rescue both in the northern part of the state where we had some tidal flooding, and along the Jersey Shore has been successful in Atlantic City as well. And so far we've been able to save a lot of lives, hundreds of lives in fact, with our search and rescue.
And over the next few days, what are your biggest concerns?
Well, getting power on, Scott, we have over 2.6 million customers without power here in New Jersey. So it is an enormous undertaking, but it's getting roads opened and getting people power back. And that's going to be a longer-term proposition.
Wishing you the best, Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey. Thanks very much for your time.
Scott, thank you very much.
Well, for their part, the airlines have learned their lesson. They started canceling flights even before Sandy arrived to avoid possible fines for stranding passengers. Bob Orr tells us jam-packed terminals filled with folks sleeping on the floor are becoming a relic of the past.
East Coast airports, including Washington's Reagan National, were largely deserted for a second straight day as airlines canceled 7,000 Tuesday flights. There were few hopeful travelers, but among them were Colby Coons and his new bride, who were anxious to start their honeymoon.
We came in this morning and it was, you know, out of one of those apocalypse movies or something where everybody's gone.
This is one of the largest disruptions of the U.S. aviation system since 9/11. While only New York area airports remain closed, major delays and cancellations are rippling across the country. Since Sunday, airlines have canceled more than 16,000 flights, and 2,000 more have already been scrubbed for tomorrow. Every major carrier is taking a hit. United has canceled more than 2,100 flights. American Airlines more than 1,800. Southwest AirTran just about 1,800. And U.S. Airways has canceled more than 1,500 flights. Industry analysts say airlines stand to lose more than $200 million to Sandy. And frustrated travelers like Rod Johnson are running short on patience.
And so far today, I've had my flight canceled 4 different times.
Rail travel through the storm zone is not much better. While Washington's Metro service limped back to life today, Amtrak's Northeast Corridor between D.C. and Boston remains shut down. Some Amtrak service could resume tomorrow. And spokesman Steve Cohen says track inspections must be done.
We have over 300 miles that we own and operate that we need to go out and inspect to make sure that everything is safe and ready to go for operations when we're able to get back to operations.
It will take a lot longer, Scott, for air travel to come all the way back, perhaps through the rest of the week.
Bob, thanks very much, but tell us, why will it take so long to get air transportation back up where it was?
Well, you have to understand the pilots are not where they're supposed to be. The planes are out of position. So we have to hit like the giant reset button on the system. Think about a snowstorm. It takes about 2 days to untangle air traffic mess on the East Coast. This, of course, is much, much worse than a bad snowstorm.
Bob, thanks. Well, speaking of snowstorms, Sandy merged with cold air from the west to create blizzard conditions in the Appalachians. Roofs collapsed, highways were shut down, and there are 4-foot snow drifts in some places. Anna Werner is in Elkins, West Virginia tonight.
For the second day, Elkins sits paralyzed under a heavy blanket of snow. No power means most of the city is shut down. There's almost no food and no fuel.
What seems to be the trouble here today?
Well, the blizzard hit us, and I guess we weren't really prepared for it.
Todd Wamsley's gas station has gas, but without power, there's no way to pump it.
We're standing on top of gasoline, but we can't get it out of there. Yeah, there's about 6,000 or 8,000 gallons there, but there's nothing we can do. We can't get it out.
Power lines sagged under the weight of wet, heavy snow, threatening to snap. Roads are slushy and snow-covered, and only a few people ventured out. Police Chief Rob White tried to keep up with requests for help.
I've got a lot of my officers that can't even get out here. I mean, some of the roads are just not plowed and there's trees down, and so we're having to work a lot of overtime to cover the shifts.
What are you dealing with weather-wise?
Heavy snow, we've got power lines down, trees down, we've got vehicles are stranded here and there, so we got our work cut out for us today.
Residents did too. Lori DeBacco needed to get something essential out of her car, buried under a foot of snow.
So you had to break into the car to get the shovel out, the scraper out. That's a great scraper. Break into the rest of the Have you ever seen it like this, a storm like this? Never. Nah. Really? What's so different about this one?
It just is wet and it keeps coming down.
As residents tonight head into their second day without power, Scott, there's an estimated 268,000 people who are without any power. And the forecast tonight says 100% chance of more snow.
Anna, thank you very much. Let us show you where we are just now. We're in the lower part of Manhattan. We're less than a mile from the New York Stock Exchange, and I'm standing on a 4-lane road. That is a tunnel down there at the end of the road, and you can see the yellow sign. The sign says that there's 12 feet 8 inches of clearance, but it looks like about 11 feet of that is full of water tonight. This part of New York City had not been hit with this kind of flooding that we saw in more than half a century. Have a look at this. This was the scene in September of 1960 when Hurricane Donna hit. The water was hip deep in lower Manhattan, and this was the scene last night. Cars and vans nearly swallowed up. David Bernard is our CBS News hurricane consultant. And David, help us put Sandy in historical perspective. What records has Sandy broken?
Well, there's a lot of aspects of this storm, Scott, that are really going to be exceptional. And two of them I'd like to point out are the pressure of the storm and then also the storm surge. Now, the pressure was equal to what we normally see in a Category 4 storm. And it's still being verified by the Hurricane Center, but it looks like it was just as strong as the famous Long Island Express hurricane in 1938. Now, the storm surge, that was the other major factor. The coastal flooding is enormous with this, and the flooding that we saw with this was made worse by the angle of approach of the storm. The fact that the hurricane came directly from the east. That's a very unusual track for a hurricane in the Northeast and has rarely been seen before, and that's what caused the record levels at the Battery in lower Manhattan, with that water level over 13.5 feet, over 3 feet higher than it got in those pictures you were just showing from Hurricane Donna in 1960.
Well, David, Irene slammed into the Northeast last year. Now we have Sandy. Is this some kind of a new trend?
Well, it very well could be part of a new trend, and it appears that hurricanes and landfalls, they kind of travel in cycles. And if we look back before Hurricane Donna in 1960, we had the Long Island Express in 1938, the Atlantic hurricane in 1944 devastated New England, and a slew of hurricanes in the 50s that affected not only New York and Long Island, but all of the Northeast, including in 1954, Carol, Edna, and Hazel. There were 3 hurricanes that season that hit the Northeast, and Scott, 2 of them were Category 3s. So we can see these kind of storms in the Northeast. They don't happen as often as they do, say, in South Florida or other places, but this is a reminder that that is hurricane country in New York.
Thank you, David. Sandy has also caused a shift in the political winds, just 1 week now before the election. That story's next. Hurricane Sandy blew the presidential election right off the front pages, but the election is now just 1 week away, and it is as tight as can be. A CBS News New York Times poll out tonight finds President Obama with a 1-point lead over Mitt Romney, 48% to 47. But Nancy Cordes tells us there was no campaigning today for the president.
Obviously, this is something that is heartbreaking for the entire nation. And we certainly feel profoundly for all the families whose lives have been upended and are going to be going through some very tough times over the next several days and perhaps several weeks and months. The most important message I have for them is that America's with you. We are standing behind you, and we are going to do everything we can to help you get back on your feet.
The president said 1,000 FEMA officials are positioned throughout the disaster zone, coordinating the distribution of food, medicine, and emergency generators. 7,400 National Guard forces are on duty or being activated in 11 states, helping to deliver supplies, remove debris, and rescue the stranded. The White House says the president spoke with 13 governors and 7 mayors today, telling them to call him personally at the White House if they aren't getting what they need.
My message to the federal government: no bureaucracy, no red tape, get resources where they're needed as fast as possible, as hard as possible, and for the duration.
The president held a conference call with the CEOs of major utility companies a short time ago to discuss ways to get utility workers from as far away as California to the disaster zone to help restore power. The White House, Scott, tells me that they're hoping the president can get back out on the campaign trail on Thursday, but right now they're just taking it day by day.
Well, Nancy, there was no campaigning for Mitt Romney either. Today, his attention was focused on the storm. And here's Jan Crawford.
It's part of the American spirit, the American way to give to people who are in need. And your generosity this morning touches my heart.
After canceling campaign rallies today in Ohio and Iowa, Romney held a disaster relief event outside of Dayton with thousands of supporters.
We won't be able to solve all the problems with our effort this morning. There are a lot of people that will still be looking for goods, even though we've gathered these things, as you know. But I know that one of the things I've learned in life is that you make the difference you can. And you can't always solve all the problems yourself, but you can make the difference in the life of one or two people.
And running mate Paul Ryan in his home state of Wisconsin also encouraged contributions to victims.
We've got a lot of our fellow Americans in the Northeast who are hurting right now. This storm has hit America hard. Let's keep the people who are suffering in our thoughts and our prayers.
With a week left until the election, Romney's challenge is to maintain a public presence at a time when his opponent has the power of the presidency behind him. Now, Romney has just landed here in Florida, where he'll resume campaigning tomorrow. After that, he's off to Virginia. That, of course, the only swing state that was directly affected by the storm. His advisors tell me they believe Romney will be able to pick up right where the race left off. But, Scott, they concede no one really knows for sure.
And not much time left. Thanks very much, Jan. As Jan and Nancy were telling us, partisan politics has given way to a spirit of cooperation in the wake of the hurricane. We were struck by what the Republican governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, said today about the president on CBS this morning.
I have to say this, the cooperation has been great with FEMA here on the ground at our intelligence center, and the cooperation from the President of the United States has been outstanding. He deserves great credit.
Bob Schieffer is our chief Washington correspondent and the anchor of Face the Nation. Bob, Governor Christie is backing Mitt Romney, but he's praising the president. Seems like hurricanes make strange bedfellows.
You know, for one thing, Governor Christie, Scott, is a very good politician. He needs the president right now. But the other part is that from the start, this has not been like Katrina, where fights broke out almost immediately among national and local officials. To the contrary, the officials this time around are behaving as we would expect them to. In a national emergency, they've been cooperating, and that is good politics. Governor Christie now has his new best friend, and it is Barack Obama. And that's probably a good thing right now for the people of New Jersey. As for the broader impact of this storm on the campaign, I talked to Rich Beeson, who is Governor Romney's political director today, and he told me it was the same storm in the same states for both candidates, and we hope to be back to business tomorrow. This storm had a minimal impact on early voting in the East Coast battleground states of North Carolina and Virginia, and all the states along the East Coast expect to have their voting places up and running on Election Day. So it will soon be back to politics. As for the impact of this storm on the campaign, except for the new friendships, I'd say it's a wash.
Bob, thanks very much. Tourists are craning their necks to see New York's newest attraction. We'll have the latest on the dangling crane next. There is plenty of trouble below the sidewalks of New York with the tunnels flooded. But today, a lot of New Yorkers were looking high above the sidewalks at a construction crane that collapsed in the high winds. Erin Moriarty tells us it's dangling like the sword of Damocles above a busy street.
The biggest attraction in New York City today is a twist of metal hanging precariously 1,000 feet over what is usually a busy midtown thoroughfare. The construction crane, more than 70 stories above Manhattan, is now putting hundreds of residents in the area at risk.
It's a sort of a billionaire bonus baby kind of building. It's many millionaires are already buying apartments in there.
Juliet Papa, a New York City radio reporter, lives in the shadow of the luxury high-rise. Papa says the crane was a concern even before the hurricane.
We know of horrible experiences with cranes in New York City.
11 people have died in crane accidents here since 2008.
According to records at the New York City's building department, there have been 21 complaints filed at this construction site so far this year, with 7 specific to the crane.
City officials say the complaints were dealt with before the hurricane, and today New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg assured the city that the crane is in no danger of falling.
The procedure there will, when the winds die down, be to try to get the boom and strap it to the building, and then we could reopen the streets.
In the meantime, residents and business owners like talent agent Steve Hers have been evacuated.
We're really damaged by this. Clients are calling, nobody's answering the phones. We're scurrying to send out email messages, sending messages on Twitter. It's bad.
And tourists stranded by Sandy are taking advantage of what is the best draw in town.
City officials say that they will send engineers up to the crane as soon as the wind up there drops below 30 miles per hour. Scott?
Aaron, thank you. The Statue of Liberty across the harbor from here reopened on Sunday, hours before the hurricane hit. It had just gone through a $30 million renovation. The statue was not damaged by the storm, but Liberty Island was flooded and will remain closed this week. We'll have an update on Sandy when this special expanded edition of the CBS Evening News continues. Tomorrow, just a few blocks from right here, financial markets will open for the first time this week. In Washington, federal offices will reopen as well, and President Obama will visit hard-hit New Jersey. More than 7 million homes and businesses on the East Coast are dark for a second night. The hurricane is blamed for at least 38 deaths in 9 states. Here in New York, the nation's largest school system will be closed for a 3rd day. Some bus service has resumed, but the subway system remains closed. Recovering from Hurricane Sandy will take time, and lots of it. That's our special expanded edition of the CBS Evening News. For all of us at CBS News all around the world, good night.